Imagine for a moment that you're standing at a crossroads in life. You don't have millions of dollars for investment, no prestigious business degree, and the product you intend to sell is completely foreign to everyone around you. All you possess is 600 borrowed from your mother and a dilapidated brick building that can barely seat 25 people. Many would call you crazy, yet from precisely this madness and makeshift beginning, a global culinary empire rose, forever changing the way we eat. Today, we are going to turn back the pages and uncover the dramatic history and hard-won lessons behind that legendary red roof, the Pizza Hut empire. It was the summer of 1958 in the peaceful city of Wichita, Kansas, where two student brothers, Dan and Frank Carney, lived. Their lives might have unfolded as calmly as any other young men's if not for a chance suggestion. A real estate agent friend approached them, complaining about a tiny, rundown building tucked away on a quiet street that he just couldn't lease. That friend casually remarked, "Why don't you two open a pizza place?" In 1950s Midwest America, pizza was an utterly foreign word. It wasn't the national fast food staple we know today. Most locals had never seen, smelled, or certainly tasted a pizza in their lives. They were accustomed to steak, potatoes, and hamburgers. Entering a market where customers didn't even know what your product was, that was an incredibly risky gamble. However, deep within the Carney brothers burned a fierce desire for independence and a keen foresight for emerging trends. They recognized that new culinary movements were quietly making their way into youth culture. With no capital of their own, they decided to take a bold step, knocking on their mother's door and borrowing $600. At that time, $600 was a fortune for an ordinary working-class family. Holding that money, heavy with their mother's hope and trust, they leased the bumpy old building, bought some used equipment, and began kneading their first pizza doughs. Even the brand's name arose from a comical scarcity. The free sign they acquired only had enough space for exactly 8 letters. Pizza took up 5 positions, and the building they rented looked precisely like a hut. The arithmetic of survival yielded a name that fit the remaining 3 letters, Pizza Hut. Dan and Frank's initial dream wasn't to create a billion-dollar corporation. Their aspiration was incredibly simple: to sell enough pizzas to repay their mother the $600 and have a little spending money as students. The genesis of a legend sometimes doesn't begin with grand plans, but with the burning desire to seize opportunity and the courage to do what no one else has done. However, the business world has never been a bed of roses. The honeymoon of initial excitement quickly faded, giving way to the harsh realities of running a business. The first, and arguably most brutal, challenge was this: how do you sell something nobody knows about? Opening a pizza restaurant in Wichita back then was akin to trying to sell refrigerators to Eskimos. In the early days, the store was deserted. The silence of that little hut felt like daggers piercing the young men's minds. Fear began to loom, and the guilt of potentially losing their mother's retirement savings kept Dan and Frank awake many nights. They faced a colossal, invisible wall: consumer habits. No matter how delicious their pizzas were, if people weren't willing to step inside and taste them, everything would be for naught. Despair and extreme confusion crept into every batch of dough. But that wasn't all. Once Pizza Hut started using a strategy of giving away free pizzas on opening day to break down customer psychological barriers, and gradually turned a profit, they decided to expand using a franchise model. This was precisely when they crashed headfirst into a second, far more devastating and widespread challenge: the quality control crisis. In the 1960s, as Pizza Hut franchises mushroomed, the Carney brothers were horrified to realize they were slowly losing control of their brainchild. In one state, a manager decided to use canned mushrooms instead of fresh ones. In another, the crusts were thin and bland. Pizza Hut's image became chaotic, and customers began to complain. Why is the pizza I ate at this store terrible and so different from the original? Dan and Frank felt utterly helpless and panicked. The creation they had painstakingly nurtured was being distorted, and the brand they had staked their honor on was on the verge of collapse due to uncontrolled rapid growth. They learned a bitter lesson: fast expansion without a system is like digging your own massive grave. If they couldn't solve the problem of consistent quality, Pizza Hut would remain a fleeting phenomenon, quickly blooming and fading, only to be swallowed by savvier competitors. Standing at the precipice of their brand's existence, the Carney brothers were forced to make bold decisions. Instead of succumbing to panic, they transformed the crisis into leverage for one of the greatest turning points in the company's history. First, they realized that for people to trust a brand, you must create an anchor point in their minds. An experience in Kansas had to be identical to an experience in New York. They immediately slammed the brakes on their aggressive expansion, gathered all their franchise owners, and issued a set of extremely stringent quality standards. From ingredient sourcing and oven temperatures to the very method of kneading dough, everything had to be unified. They weren't just selling a recipe, they began selling an operating system. However, flavor consistency alone wasn't enough to stand out amidst the dozens of competitors that were starting to emerge. They needed an icon. In 1969, they hired architect Richard D. Burke with a simple yet challenging request. Design for us a store appearance that anyone driving by at 100 kilometers per hour can instantly recognize as Pizza Hut. And so, the legendary pointed red roof was born. That vibrant red tile roof wasn't just architecture. It was a beacon calling to customers, a visual declaration of warmth, familiarity, and reliable quality. Furthermore, instead of passively sticking to traditional recipes, they continuously innovated to suit American palates. The introduction of the pan pizza, with its thick crust, crispy on the outside yet soft and airy inside, created an earthquake in the fast food industry. It was no longer the delicate pizza of Italy. It had become America's pizza, created by Americans. They overcame their difficulties by fundamentally changing their mindset, shifting from making good pizzas to building a machine that makes good and consistent pizzas. The pivotal lesson they learned was that the power of $1 billion brand doesn't lie in a secret recipe, but in a smoothly operating system and the ability to deeply imprint a single image into the minds of customers worldwide. From a dilapidated 25-seat hut in Kansas, the Carney brothers ignited a vibrant red flame that spread across America and then around the world. By the 1970s, Pizza Hut had become the largest pizza chain on the planet, outcompeting even the fiercest rivals. The true pinnacle arrived in 1977 when the colossal PepsiCo Corporation paid a staggering $1.2 billion, an absolutely immense sum at the time, to acquire the brand. Those once penniless students, with a $600 debt to their mother, had now become legends of American business. Today, although owned by Yum! Brands, Pizza Hut proudly boasts tens of thousands of stores spanning over 100 countries. So, what core business philosophies guided them to this glorious peak? Firstly, it was the philosophy of selling a category, not just a product. Dan and Frank didn't just sell pizzas. They were the ones who transformed pizza from an obscure ethnic dish into a familiar culinary category for family gatherings. They created a space where people could gather and share hot slices. Secondly, it was the mindset of turning disadvantages into a unique identity. The name Pizza Hut came about because the sign was too short, and the hut design was born from an old building. But instead of being ashamed or trying to hide it, they embraced that very hut image as an enduring symbol. They taught us that scarcity isn't a barrier. It's the most excellent filter to force your creativity to flourish. Finally, the core philosophy for sustained growth was this: quality might bring customers in the first time, but consistency keeps them coming back forever. Whether you open one store or 10,000, if customers don't experience the same level of appreciation and consistent flavor, your empire will crumble. The red roof of Pizza Hut is precisely that promise of consistency. My friends, the journey of Dan and Frank Carney with Pizza Hut is the most vivid proof that where you start is far less important than how you choose to run the race. A $600 loan, a product nobody knew, a dilapidated storefront, all things that seemed like a recipe for disastrous failure instead became the catalyst for a monumental empire. If you are on an entrepreneurial path, if you are looking at your small, makeshift resources and feeling insecure, then remember the image of that Pizza Hut in 1958. Don't wait until you have a perfect business plan. Don't wait until you have millions of dollars in hand to begin. Start with what you have, right where you stand. Difficulties will rise and chaos will undoubtedly shake you, but it is precisely how you establish your systems, uphold your promises to customers, and remain consistent with an iconic image that will determine who you become on the business map. Sometimes, the only limitation is actually the most powerful leverage to create something truly different. Thank you for tuning into today's story. In your opinion, which decision made by the Carney brothers was the most audacious and impressive throughout this entire journey? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next inspiring business stories. See you all next time.